Okay, let's unpack this. So imagine this, you stumble upon a skull, right? It's 140,000 years old, found in a cave over in Israel.
Hmm.
And get this, it's not quite human like we think of humans, but it's not exactly Neanderthal either. It's this incredible blend. It just kind of flips our whole understanding of human evolution upside down.
Yeah, or think about this one. NVIDIA, the AI chip company.
Oh yeah, big news there.
Huge.
Yeah.
They just became the first company ever to hit a $4 trillion market cap. $4 trillion.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that number. A company built on AI worth more than, well, entire countries? It's mind-boggling.
And what's really insightful here, I think, is how these two things, ancient history and this super cutting-edge tech, they don't just show things are always changing.
Right.
They actually challenge our basic ideas about how fast change can happen, whether it's biological change, geological, or technological like NVIDIA. It sort of forces us to redefine what's normal.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here for. Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today, basically, is to cut through all that noise, all the headlines flying around, and dig out the really important bits of knowledge, the insights from the sources you've sent us.
Yeah, we're going from that ancient past you mentioned, right up to the latest in AI. We'll touch on, tricky international diplomacy, the real impacts of climate change, all of it.
Think of this as your shortcut, to really get what's happening in this interconnected world of ours.
We'll give you the context you need, look at things from different angles, and try to genuinely connect the dots for you.
And we promise just enough surprising facts and, genuine curiosity to keep things interesting. So let's dive in. Unveiling our world, scientific discoveries and technological advancements. All right, let's kick things off by digging into some incredible science discoveries and the tech advancements that are, well, quite literally changing how we see human history, our planet, even the universe. We're starting with some finds that really challenge what we thought we knew. Unearthing human history and Earth's mysteries, science and geology. So first up, let's talk about this really amazing find from the Shul Cave that's in Israel. Researchers there dug up a skull, 140,000 years old.
Wow.
Now, this isn't just any old skull. What makes it so interesting is it's got this mix, this blend of modern human features and Neanderthal features.
A mix, how so?
Well, things like a really strong brow ridge, and no chin. Those are pretty typical Neanderthal things.
Right, I remember reading about those.
But then, on the same skull, there are other features that look much more like modern humans. And that's where it gets, well, really fascinating for the paleoanthropologists.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this isn't just like another fossil added to the pile.
Yeah.
It's sparking a huge debate in the scientific community. It forces us to rethink, how human evolution actually worked.
Exactly. So what are they debating? Like, what are the possibilities?
Well, researchers are asking, okay, is this skull maybe from a hybrid? The child of a modern human and a Neanderthal? Which would mean maybe that kind of interbreeding was happening way more often than we used to think.
Okay. That's one possibility.
Or, and this is maybe even more intriguing, does it point to a whole different branch of the human family tree, one we didn't even know existed, completely lost to history until now?
Wow, a lost branch.
Yeah, and the real point here isn't just about, finding a new twig on the family tree. It's about how discoveries like this constantly remind us that our neat little categories, our classifications, they don't always hold up.
Nature's messy.
Exactly. Evolution is way messier, much more intertwined than any textbook diagram can really show. It kind of pushes us to accept more genetic fluidity rather than these strict, separate ancestral lines.
So what does this actually mean for, our bigger picture understanding of where we all came from?
Well, it suggests that maybe these different early human groups were bumping into each other, interacting way more commonly than we pictured.
Right.
And those interactions could have really shaped the genes of modern humans in, well, pretty significant ways.
Yeah.
It hints at a family tree that's less like separate branches and maybe more like a tangled vine.
A tangled vine. I like that. It's not just digging up bones. It's like reevaluating our whole origin story. Maybe our shared past is way more diverse, maybe even more collaborative than we thought.
Precisely. It forces us to reconsider that straight line idea of human evolution. Think of it maybe like a braided river instead of separate streams flowing side by side.
Yeah.
Our lineage might just be this mosaic built from all these different ancestral groups mixing and flowing together over time.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we keep finding stuff like this, it just shows how ongoing research, both digging things up and looking at kinetics, keeps adding these new layers of complexity.
Okay, so speaking of things being kind of upside down or mixed up, let's shift gears from ancient humans to the Earth itself, specifically under the North Sea. You know, that bit of the Atlantic between Great Britain and Scandinavia, Germany, the Netherlands, and so on.
Right, the North Sea. What's happening there?
Well, scientists have found something really weird, geologically speaking. It involves something called stratigraphic inversion. Fancy term.
Stratigraphic inversion. Okay, break that down.
Normally, rock layers stack up like a cake, right? Oldest stuff at the bottom, youngest stuff on top. Simple chronology.
Makes sense. Layer cake geology.
Yeah, but here, in these big underwater mounds they call synkites, they're finding younger layers of sediment underneath older layers.
Wait, younger stuff below older stuff.
Exactly. It's like finding the frosting on the bottom layer of the cake. It just shouldn't be that way, according to the usual rules.
Okay, that is weird. It really messes with the standard geological thinking. It's not just a little oddity. It's like finding out the Earth's history book has pages completely out of order in that spot.
So how could that even happen?
But that's what they're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
It forces them to explore some pretty powerful possibilities, maybe some really unique, intense tectonic movements push things around, or maybe some unusual way sediment was deposited, or maybe even the impact of glaciers, during the ice ages. The sheer weight of all that ice could have deformed the rock layers, squished them, pushed older stuff up over younger stuff.
Okay.
Understanding why this happened, why the younger stuff is below the older stuff, it's crucial because it literally changes the map for where we might find natural resources trapped underground or where potential geological hazards like fault lines might be.
Yeah.
It makes us rethink how the Earth's crust actually behaves.
So why is figuring this inversion out so important then? For geologists and, for us.
Because if you just assume the layers are always in chronological order, oldest on bottom, you could be completely misreading millions of years of Earth's history in that area.
Right, you'd get the timeline wrong.
Totally wrong. And that could lead to big mistakes in everything from trying to find oil and gas to figuring out where earthquakes might happen or where ground might be unstable for building. It just reminds us that even the solid ground under us can hold surprises that break the rules we thought we knew. It definitely shows how complex geological systems can be. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it just highlights that Earth's history isn't always this neat, straight story. Often, it involves these really unique, localized events that don't fit the simple models. And figuring out these puzzles gives us vital information for managing resources and understanding hazards. It keeps pushing geology forward.
Okay, moving from the ancient and the geological down to the microscopic level now. Let's talk about speeding up evolution, but in human cells, in a lab.
All right, this is fascinating stuff. There's a breakthrough technique called directed evolution.
Directed evolution? Sounds like science fiction.
It kind of does, but it's real. Basically, it lets scientists dramatically speed up the process of genetic variation, mutations, and natural selection, but all within human cells growing in the lab.
So like evolution on fast forward.
Pretty much. This technique lets them develop proteins, for example, that have specific characteristics they want, way, way faster than it would ever happen naturally out in the world.
Okay, so what are the practical uses for that?
Well, what's really cool is it gives us this controlled setting to study how evolution actually works, how genetic mutations happen and spread, but at a speed we can actually observe. We can watch processes in days or weeks that might normally take thousands, even millions of years.
And the potential for medicine must be huge.
Oh, absolutely massive. Imagine being able to drastically cut down the time it takes to develop new drugs or treatments.
Yeah.
If you can direct the evolution of, say, an antibody in the lab to perfectly target a disease, you could potentially create new medicines much, much faster. It's also a big deal for synthetic biology, designing biological systems to do new things. It really opens up amazing possibilities for creating therapies tailored specifically to individuals or diseases.
It sounds like a monumental step forward.
It really is. It could revolutionize how we discover drugs and develop therapies, because we're not just observing biology anymore, we're starting to actively guide it, to engineer it for specific purposes. That shift from observing to guiding is it's a really big deal for medicine. B, looking to the cosmos, space exploration.
All right, from the incredibly small, let's zoom way out now, to the incredibly vast. Let's look up at the cosmos. NASA's got a new big telescope coming online, the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope. and it's hitting some major milestones as it gets ready for deep space exploration.
Hi, yes, the Roman telescope. What's the latest?
Well, the technicians down at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, that's in Maryland in the U.S., they've just successfully installed this massive thing called the Solar Array Sun Shield onto the telescope.
Okay, solar array sun shield. Sounds important. What does it do? Power and shade.
Exactly. This shield isn't just about generating power, though it does that too. It's absolutely critical for the telescope's ability to see faint infrared light from the distant universe.
Infrared, right. That's key for looking back in time.
Totally. So it's made up of 6 huge solar panels. Each one is about 23 by 33 feet, and they're covered in almost 4,000 photovoltaic cells each.
Wow, it's a lot of solar panels.
Yeah, and these panels don't just power the telescope, they also act as a giant sunshade. They block the heat and light from the sun, earth, and moon, keeping the telescope's super-sensitive infrared instruments incredibly cold.
And that cooling is essential, right? Otherwise, the heat from the telescope itself would just drown out the faint signals from space.
Precisely. You need it super cold for that kind of observational accuracy, especially when you're hunting for things like dark energy and dark matter clues.
So how close is it to being ready? What's the timeline?
It's getting there. They say the observatory is now about 90% complete. The plan is to finish the final assembly and then do a whole lot of really rigorous testing through the end of this year.
And launch. When are they hoping for that?
NASA's aiming for a launch as early as fall 2026. So, just a couple of years away, potentially.
That's exciting. And remind us, what's the main mission for Roman? Why is it such a big deal, especially with Webb already up there doing amazing things?
Good question.
Roman has huge potential, especially for tackling those big cosmic mysteries. Dark energy and dark matter. While the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, gives us these incredible, detailed close-ups of specific objects.
Yeah, those images are stunning.
They are. But Roman is designed differently. It has a much wider field of view. Think of it like a wide-angle lens compared to Webb's telephoto lens.
Ah, okay. So it sees a bigger chunk of the sky at once.
Exactly. It's designed to survey huge areas of the universe, map millions, even billions of galaxies across cosmic time. And by doing that, scientists hope to measure how the expansion of the universe has changed over time, which should give us vital clues about what dark energy actually is. And it will also map the distribution of dark matter. So, different tools for different cosmic questions.
Got it. So Webb zooms in, Roman zooms out to get the big picture. Makes sense.
Pretty much.
And speaking of cosmic wonders and amazing images, NASA's other big eye in the sky, the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, just hit its 3rd anniversary of operation.
3 years already. Wow.
Yeah, time flies when you're exploring the universe. And to celebrate, they released this absolutely stunning new image. It's a near-infrared view of a star-forming region called the Cat's Paw Nebula.
Oh, the Cat's Paw Nebula,
Yeah.
NGC 6334. That's a classic target. Where is that located again?
It's about 4,000 light years away from us over in the constellation the Scorpius. And this new Webb image just reveals incredible detail.
That's Webb's superpower, isn't it? Seeing through the dust and infrared. What kind of details are we talking about?
Well, the sheer resolution is amazing. You can see these intricate structures inside the nebula. There are these formations that kind of look like, well, toe beans, apparently.
No beans, seriously.
That's what the press release says. And inside these toe beans are massive young stars just forming. Then there's this other structure called the Opera House with these cool tiered layers of dust.
Opera House, toe beans.
Yeah.
They have fun naming these things.
They do. You also see these really dense filaments of dust where even more stars might still be forming, kind of like cosmic cocoons, and these bright, fiery red clumps that show where stars are actively forming, but still hidden deep inside the dust clouds.
So Webb is really piercing through that veil of dust that usually hides these nurseries from view in visible light, right?
Yeah.
It's showing us the stellar genesis, the star birth, happening right now.
Exactly. It's like getting a high-definition look inside the cosmic nursery. How do these new insights, these amazing pictures, actually help scientists?
Well, visuals like this give us brand new insights into that whole process of how clouds of gas and dust collapse to form stars. It's fundamental to understanding how galaxies evolve.
Right, the cloud-to-star cycle.
Exactly. Webb builds on what telescopes like Hubble and Spitzer saw before, but its infrared capability lets us see through the dust like never before. We see structures and processes we couldn't resolve previously. And of course, every amazing image like this raises new scientific questions for researchers to chase down with future observations. It really helps refine our models of star formation and the whole interplay of gas, dust, and gravity that creates new suns. C. The digital frontier. Technology news.
Okay, let's pivot now from the vastness of space right back down to Earth, and specifically into the digital frontier. AI, artificial intelligence, it's just everywhere, isn't it? It's dominating the tech news, it's reshaping the global economy, even geopolitics.
Absolutely. The scale is just hard to comprehend sometimes.
Yeah.
We mentioned NVIDIA hitting that $4 trillion market cap.
Yeah, still staggering.
And that milestone, it's not just about one company's stock price. It's really this profound statement about Wall Street's confidence, maybe even conviction, in AI's power to transform, well, everything.
Yeah, it's like they see it as the next big utility, like electricity or the internet.
Precisely. It's seen as a foundational shift for almost every industry. And what's really insightful, I think, about NVIDIA's valuation specifically is that it's not just about the potential of AI applications down the road. It signals how the market values the infrastructure, the tools needed for the AI revolution. NVIDIA isn't necessarily selling the final AI product. They're selling the essential hardware, the specialized chips, the picks and shovels for this digital gold rush.
Ah, the picks and shovels. Good analogy. Often the most reliable money is made selling those.
Historically, yes. And NVIDIA isn't just resting on its laurels with that market cap. There are reports suggesting they're planning to release a new AI chip specifically designed for the Chinese market.
Oh, interesting. Trying to navigate those U.S. export restrictions.
Exactly. The idea is to create a chip that complies with the current U.S. rules, but still meets some of the demand in China. They're talking about a potential launch maybe as early as September.
Wow, that's fast. It really highlights that tightrope walk between global business, tech leadership, and national security concerns, doesn't it?
It really does. It raises big questions about how effective export controls can ultimately be when the global demand is so high, and how these giant tech companies adapt to geopolitical pressures. NVIDIA's strategy here shows just how vital AI infrastructure is seen globally, even with attempts to control its spread. It's this complex dance between security worries and huge economic opportunities. A very pragmatic response, you could say, but one that definitely impacts who leads in tech globally.
And it's not just NVIDIA making moves. Google is also pushing hard on the AI front, expanding globally.
Yeah, what's Google up to?
Well, they've just launched a bunch of their AI-powered advertising tools in India. That market's apparently become even more attractive now that this specific local tax on online ads, the Google tax, has been repealed.
Ah, so a policy change opens the door for a big tech push. Makes sense. Shows how government decisions directly influence where these companies focus their AI rollouts.
Right. And it's not just about ads for Google. They're also investing in the ecosystem. They announced their latest group for the AI American Infrastructure Academy.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically a 6-month program offering tech support and mentorship to early-stage startups, seed to Series A companies.
Nurturing the next generation.
Exactly. Startups that are using AI in really important areas like healthcare, agriculture, critical infrastructure. So Google's kind of fostering the future applications of AI, making sure there's a pipeline of innovation.
That's smart. It's a multi-pronged approach. You expand in big markets like India, but also cultivate the grassroots innovation back home, cements AI's role across the board.
And this AI wave, the one driving NVIDIA's value and Google's strategy, it's also washing over national security now. There's this new generation of defense startups popping up in Europe.
Defense startups. Interesting. What's their angle?
They basically think they can build the weapon systems. Europe needs things like drones, for example, much faster, cheaper, and more efficiently than the traditional big defense contractors.
Leveraging that agile startup mentality for defense?
Yeah.
That could be disruptive.
Yeah, it signals a potential shift in how military capabilities get developed. Maybe less reliance on the old slow giants and more on these nimble tech companies.
And connecting that to the bigger picture, especially with the war in Ukraine, highlighting needs.
Yeah.
It suggests maybe a move towards more decentralized, faster defense manufacturing. It's a practical response to the security situation in Europe, showing how quickly tech advancements can bleed into geopolitics and military thinking.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit within tech to the ever-eventful world of social media and the tech giants themselves. Big news from X, formerly Twitter.
What now?
Linda Yaccarino has resigned as CEO. She was there less than 2 years.
Wow, that wasn't long. Why the departure?
Well, reports suggest her time there was pretty rough. Lots of internal friction, constant battles over content moderation and ongoing struggles to keep advertisers happy and on the platform. Plus, apparently she had pretty limited actual power under Elon Musk's ownership. Sounds like a tough job.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Leading a platform like X, especially under such, let's say, direct and often controversial ownership, it highlights the massive challenges. Balancing free speech ideals, platform safety, advertiser demands, it's an incredibly difficult tightrope to walk, and that tension just keeps growing.
And speaking of controversy and Elon Musk, his AI chatbot, Grok.
Oh, boy. What did Grok do now?
Well, it faced some pretty serious accusations of promoting anti-Semitic content, including apparently praising Hitler, which obviously caused a huge backlash and raised major concerns about the AI's algorithms and training data.
Yikes. That's not good.
Yeah.
Serious safety and bias issues there.
Right. But despite that pretty major controversy, Musk announced that Grok is going to be integrated into Tesla cars, like as early as next week, to enhance their software features.
Wait, really? Integrate that AI into cars right after that controversy?
Yeah.
That seems bold, maybe reckless.
It does seem incredibly fast.
Yeah, it raises really important questions about how quickly AI is being rolled out, especially consumer-facing AI, sometimes before the safety and ethical kinks are fully worked out. Putting Grok in cars, despite those demonstrated problems, brings that whole AI safety debate right into people's daily lives. Who's responsible when the AI says or does harmful things? It forces a public conversation about accountability.
Definitely. Okay, moving away from the big controversies for a sec, YouTube's also making changes, but maybe more subtle ones. They've redesigned their trending page.
Oh, how so? Is it gone?
Not gone, but definitely less prominent. It's not a main tab anymore. You have to sort of scroll up to the top, tap Explore, and then tap Trending.
Burying it a bit. Why would they do that?
Well, it affects how people discover content, right? Both for users and for creators hoping to get on that page.
Yeah, it could indicate a shift in their strategy. Maybe moving away from one single what's hot list towards more personalized recommendations, stuff driven by the algorithm to keep you watching longer.
Makes sense. Serve you what you might like rather than what everyone else is watching.
It reflects a broader trend across platforms, really. Prioritizing engagement through personalization, even if it means a shared cultural trending moment, becomes less common.
Okay, let's talk digital security and consumer protection now. Over in the UK, the National Crime Agency made some arrests.
Okay, what was the crime?
A hacking spree targeting major UK retailers. Big names like Marks & Spencer, Harrods, the Co-op. Apparently, it involved ransomware attacks. They arrested 4 people, a woman, and 3 teenagers.
Teenagers involved in ransomware attacks on major retailers. Wow. That really underscores how widespread cybercrime is, hitting big businesses, and how diverse the perpetrators can be. It's a constant battle for companies to stay secure.
Definitely. And on the consumer protection side, but this time in the US, there's been a setback for people trying to cancel subscriptions.
Ugh. What happened? Those can be a nightmare to cancel sometimes.
Tell me about it. Well, a federal appeals court has blocked the Federal Trade Commission's click-to-cancel rule.
Click to cancel. What was that supposed to do?
The idea was simple. Make it just as easy to cancel an online subscription as it was to sign up for it. You know, like a clear, simple button.
That sounds sensible. So the court blocked it.
Yep. And it's seen as a win for businesses, obviously, but a loss for consumer protection efforts. It means companies can keep making it, well, intentionally difficult to unsubscribe from those recurring charges you might have forgotten about.
Yeah, that ruling definitely favors the companies that rely on that subscription inertia, making it harder for consumers to opt out easily. It really highlights that ongoing fight between business models designed to be sticky and consumer rights in the digital age.
Absolutely. Finally, shifting the cars for a moment, there's a new electric vehicle startup on the scene called Slate Auto. And guess who's backing it?
Who?
Jeff Bezos, Amazon founder. He's apparently aiming for Slate Auto to become America's newest automaker.
Bezos getting into the EV game. Interesting. The market's crowded, but clearly big players still see huge potential there.
Yeah, it signals there's still a lot of confidence and investment money flowing into electric vehicles, even with established giants like General Motors already mapping out their own EV plans for the next decade, 2025 to 2035.
Right. The entry of a heavily backed newcomer like Slate just ups the competitive pressure. It suggests the EV transition is far from over, and even the big traditional automakers like GM know they have to keep innovating rapidly to stay relevant in this electric future.
The geopolitical chessboard, conflicts, diplomacy, and domestic shifts.
Okay, let's zoom out again from the world of tech and business to the wider geopolitical chessboard. Things are constantly moving here. Conflicts, diplomatic maneuvers, big domestic shifts, all influencing millions of lives. A Ukraine conflict, shifting dynamics and international responses. Let's start with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The capital, Kiev, is still facing these relentless Russian attacks, mostly drones and missiles, especially overnight. Yeah, the reports are grim. Casualties, fires.
Exactly. Recent attacks killed at least 2 people, injured 13 others. There were widespread fires, and we even saw drone wreckage hitting residential buildings. It's clearly designed to spread fear, wear down morale. It seems like Russia's really intensifying its drone warfare, targeting infrastructure, but inevitably hitting civilians.
That constant targeting of civilian areas or infrastructure near them, it's a clear strategy. Inflict psychological pain, disrupt normal life, damage the economy. It's brutal.
And in response to this, Germany has pledged to provide more air defense systems for Ukraine, which underscores just how worried Europe is about this escalating, maybe even spilling over.
Germany's commitment there is crucial. Air defense is probably Ukraine's single most critical need right now, and it does signal a strengthening of European resolve, but also that underlying fear of a wider conflict. It really brings up the question of the long-term human cost of this kind of attritional, infrastructure-focused warfare on the civilian population.
Meanwhile, let's look at the U.S. role. Military aid diplomacy. The U.S. has apparently resumed sending critical weapons to Ukraine, things like 155mm artillery shells, those precision-guided GMLRS rockets.
Resumed. Was there a pause?
Yeah, there was a brief pause. The Pentagon reportedly halted shipments for a bit, citing concerns about depleting the U.S.'s own military stockpiles. White House officials called it a strategic review, but it definitely caused some anxiety, you can imagine.
A strategic review. That kind of fluctuation in aid flow, even if temporary, creates real uncertainty for Ukraine on the battlefield. They need a predictable supply. It really highlights that tough balancing act the U.S. faces supporting allies versus maintaining its own defense readiness.
And former U.S. President Donald Trump has jumped into this discussion, too. He commented on how expensive these advanced systems are, like the Patriot missile defense.
Right, they're incredibly costly.
He also criticized the current administration for potentially running down U.S. stockpiles. The total aid since 2022 is estimated at nearly $115 billion.
Wow, that's a staggering number.
And Trump has also been talking about wanting a ceasefire, pushing for direct negotiations with Russia. Interestingly, reports suggest Ukrainian officials might be becoming, well, maybe more open to revisiting talks, partly perhaps to avoid diplomatic issues with Western allies, especially given Trump's public push for a peace deal.
That really shows you how much U.S. domestic politics can ripple outwards and influence a major global conflict. Trump's stance on aid, on negotiations, it becomes this new factor that Kyiv has to weigh in its calculations, potentially shifting their diplomatic strategy just to keep Western support unified, or at least stable.
It reflects that tension between different foreign policy approaches, right? One prioritizing maybe a quicker end to the spending and the fighting, even if it involves compromises, versus another focused on sustained support for sovereignty.
Exactly. It underscores the immense financial cost of modern warfare for the nations providing support, and how different political viewpoints lead to very different ideas about the best path forward.
On the diplomatic front, there was a significant meeting. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. This happened in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia, during an ASEAN forum.
Rubio and Lavrov meeting. That's notable. It's only their second face-to-face since Trump returned to office, right?
That's right. Rubio described the talk as frank and important, which suggests, maybe not friendly, but that Washington is still committed to keeping lines of communication open, even with all the tension.
And that's vital. Even if it doesn't signal an immediate breakthrough, having that back channel, that ability for the top diplomats to talk directly, is crucial in managing tensions between major powers, especially now. It's like a safety valve, preventing misunderstandings from escalating things further. The Kremlin, for its part, keeps saying Russia is open to a peaceful resolution, but insists the battlefield situation keeps changing while Kyiv delays scheduling more direct peace talks.
Okay, let's look at NATO and EU unity now, because there seem to be some cracks appearing there. Poland's president, Andrzej Duda, made some waves recently.
Poland. They've been a key supporter of Ukraine. What did he say?
He signaled that Poland might consider shutting down Ryazów Airport, that's in southeastern Poland, and it's been this absolutely vital hub for getting NATO military aid into Ukraine.
Shutting down Ryazów. Why?
Duda cited a lack of consultation. He accused Ukraine and NATO of basically treating Polish infrastructure like they owned it without proper discussion. His comments also come at a time of existing tensions, and the incoming Polish leader, Karol Nawrocki, is known to be more critical of Ukraine joining NATO or the EU.
Wow, that's a really significant friction point within the alliance.
Yeah.
Poland is geographically critical for aid delivery. Duda's comments seem to reflect some growing frustration in Poland, maybe feeling taken for granted. And if the incoming leadership is less supportive, that could seriously impact the logistics of supporting Ukraine. It raises big questions about how well the alliance is coordinating internally.
And it doesn't seem like an isolated issue. Other reports suggest European NATO members are feeling uncertain about how best to help Ukraine. They're apparently getting mixed signals from the U.S. administration, especially regarding potential U.S. troop movements away from Europe, and feeling like they weren't consulted beforehand.
So worries about U.S. reliability adding to the mix.
Seems like it. And then you have Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, stirring the pot again.
What's Orban saying now?
He basically declared that both Ukraine and the European Union have already lost the conflict with Russia. He said continuing the military fight is futile and diplomacy is the only way forward. He also repeated Hungary's opposition to EU sanctions on Russia and their refusal to send weapons to Ukraine.
So you've got Polish frustration, wider European uncertainty about the U.S., and Hungarian dissent openly challenging the whole strategy. That really paints a picture of strained unity within NATO and the EU.
Yeah, and while European leaders did commit to raising defense spending targets at a recent NATO summit, and the EU has shifted huge amounts of money, up to 335 billion euros from COVID relief funds towards defense, plus a new 150 billion euro loan facility. It feels a bit like they're scrambling to bolster their own capabilities because of this uncertainty and internal division.
Orban's comments really highlight those deep ideological splits within the EU about the war. His position often resonates with more nationalist or, isolationist viewpoints elsewhere. It just shows how hard it is to maintain a truly unified front when national interests and political philosophies clash so sharply.
Finally, on this regional front, while the focus is often on Ukraine, there's a noticeable shift happening in the South Caucasus region, that strategic area between Eastern Europe and Western Asia.
Countries like Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. What's the shift?
It seems the region is increasingly moving away from Russia's traditional sphere of influence. And that's creating openings for other global players, the U.S., European countries, to step in and increase their own influence there.
That's a significant geopolitical development. If Russia's grip loosens in the South Caucasus, it could redraw maps for energy pipelines, security alliances, economic ties. It creates this vacuum that other powers are definitely watching closely, potentially changing the whole balance of power in a really crucial crossroads region. B, global hotspots in international relations.
Okay, moving beyond the immediate Ukraine conflict, let's look at other global hotspots in international relations. The Red Sea is still a major area of concern for maritime security.
Yeah, the Houthi attacks have been relentless. What's the latest?
Well, Yemen's Houthi rebels have sunk another cargo ship in the Red Sea. That's the second one in just a week. Search efforts for survivors are underway. These attacks are really challenging that supposed ceasefire agreement reached back in May with the U.S. and just highlighting the intense danger to ships and crews trying to navigate that critical waterway.
A second ship sunk in a week. That's a serious escalation. What's the human toll?
Reports say at least 2 people were killed in this latest sinking and 15 are still missing. Thankfully, some crew members were rescued.
It's terrible. And the economic impact of this, it just keeps growing, right?
Absolutely. This kind of violence could easily push up oil prices again, definitely increases shipping costs, insurance rates skyrocket. It all hits global supply chains and eventually consumer pockets. And it's not just about shipping. The Houthis also reportedly fired missiles targeting an airport in Israel, which just underscores how this is tied into the wider regional conflict.
Yeah, these are not isolated incidents. They show the Houthis remain capable and willing to disrupt one of the world's most vital trade arteries, and it connects directly to the tensions surrounding the conflict in Gaza and with Israel. It's a dangerous mix with global economic consequences.
And speaking of the Gaza crisis, the humanitarian situation there remains absolutely catastrophic.
Just heartbreaking reports coming out daily.
Get this, over 100 premature babies in Gaza are reportedly at severe risk because hospitals are on the verge of completely running out of fuel.
No fuel means no power for incubators.
Exactly. Incubators, ventilators, all the life support equipment needs constant power. Health officials have issued these urgent warnings, saying these babies' lives are hanging by a thread. And then separately, there was this devastating incident. At least 15 Palestinians were killed, including 8 children and 2 women.
Oh no. Where? How?
They were hit by an Israeli strike near a medical point in central Gaza. They were apparently queuing up to get nutritional supplements in the town of Deir al-Balah.
Queuing for aid and they get hit. That's horrific. It just underscores the extreme danger civilians face constantly. Incidents like that inevitably lead to calls for accountability, for better protection of non-combatants. It forces the world to confront the brutal realities and ethical questions of this conflict.
And the issue of accountability is definitely front and center in a controversial move by the United States. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on a UN official.
Sanctioning a UN official. Who and why?
Her name is Francesca Albanese. She's the UN's special rapporteur focused on the Palestinian territories. She's been very outspoken and has labeled Israel's military actions in Gaza as genocide.
Okay, genocide is obviously a very loaded term, legally and politically. So the U.S. sanctioned her for saying that?
Essentially, yes. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio accused her of engaging in political and economic warfare. He also specifically cited her advocacy for the International Criminal Court, the ICC, to take action against American and Israeli officials regarding the conflict.
Oh, the ICC angle. That's key.
Yeah.
Because neither the U.S. nor Israel are members of the ICC, and they both reject its authority over their citizens or officials.
Right. So the U.S. sees her calls for ICC action as an attack. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, has criticized the U.S. sanctions, saying they harm efforts towards governance and justice.
This whole situation just throws into sharp relief the massive divide between the U.S. position and how some international human rights bodies view accountability in conflicts like this. Sanctioning a UN rapporteur is a very strong statement by the U.S., rejecting any external legal authority over its actions or its allies. It really fuels that debate about national sovereignty versus international law and who gets to judge actions taken during wartime. A fundamental disagreement.
Shifting focus a bit, but still on regional tensions, a new report is warning that the UK, the United Kingdom, faces a threat from Iran that's becoming rising and unpredictable. They're actually comparing it to the threat level posed by Russia.
Iran comparable to Russia in terms of threat to the UK. That's a significant assessment.
Yeah, the report warns of an increased risk of Iranian attacks targeting people actually living in the UK. It definitely changes the security picture for Britain.
It indicates a broadening security challenge for the UK, demanding a more adaptive strategy beyond just focusing on Russia. A stark reminder that geopolitical risks are always shifting.
And here's something that raised eyebrows. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, made a statement about Germany.
Germany, what about them?
Grossi said that Germany, a country in Central Europe, actually has the capability, the knowledge, the materials to develop a nuclear weapon within months if they ever decided to.
Wow. He actually said that. That Germany could go nuclear that quickly.
He did. Now, he immediately followed up by reaffirming Germany's solid commitment to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, saying they have no intention of doing so, but just stating the capability is there.
Yeah, that's potent. Even while stressing their commitment not to build weapons, just highlighting the inherent potential of any technologically advanced nation is a powerful reminder. It really underscores why things like the NPT and constant vigilance are so critical, especially now. The mere potential can shift how countries view each other strategically.
Elsewhere in international relations, ahead of Russian President Vladimir Putin's planned visit to India, there's a new book out focusing on the India-Russia relationship.
That's always a complex one, especially now with the Ukraine war.
Exactly. The book emphasizes how enduring their ties are, based on shared strategic interests and, they say, mutual trust, despite all the global upheaval. Apparently, India continues to see its relationship with Russia as a stabilizing factor in global politics and the economy.
It really showcases India's commitment to that multi-aligned foreign policy, right?
Yeah.
They're prioritizing their own national interests, balancing relationships, rather than picking a side definitively between Russia and the West.
Yeah, seems so. They maintain that those historical ties, especially for things like energy and defense, are vital for them, particularly as they try to navigate this shifting global power dynamic. It's a clear sign that global alliances aren't just binary anymore. They're much more complex, more transactional, maybe. See domestic political agendas and controversies. All right, let's turn our attention inward now to domestic politics and controversies playing out within different countries. And there's certainly no shortage of drama. Let's start in France.
Okay, what's happening in France?
The main center-right party, Les Républicains, has put forward this pretty controversial bill. They want to make anti-Republican speech or online content a criminal offense punishable by fines.
Anti-Republican speech. That sounds vague. What does that even mean?
Exactly, that's the criticism. Critics are saying the principles are so undefined that it could easily be used to just clamp down on legitimate dissent, stifle freedom of expression. Some are even comparing it to tactics used by authoritarian regimes to silence opposition.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope. It raises that fundamental question about where you draw the line between protecting national values or unity and protecting basic democratic freedoms like free speech. Defining anti-Republican is key, and if it's too broad, it definitely risks chilling legitimate political debate, a concern you hear from both the left and the right when governments try to legislate speech too broadly.
And still in France, another big political story. The European Court of Human Rights has upheld a 5-year ban preventing Marine Le Pen, the prominent right-wing politician, from running for election.
Le Pen banned.
It follows her conviction for embezzlement, specifically related to misusing European Union funds back when she was a member of the European Parliament.
Ah, okay. So a legal conviction leading to an election ban.
Right. Now, Le Pen denies she did anything wrong, claims it's all politically motivated. And adding to the drama, her former party, the National Rally, recently had its offices raided by police as part of an investigation into alleged campaign finance irregularities.
So legal trouble's mounting for her and her party.
Seems so. And interestingly, U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance actually voiced support for Le Pen after the ban was upheld. French authorities quickly dismissed that as foreign interference in their affairs.
Wow, U.S. leaders weighing in on a French politician's legal case. That's unusual. It really highlights how tangled legal accountability, accusations of political targeting, and international relations can get. Le Pen's case shows the intense pressure opposition figures, especially on the nationalist right, can face. And the U.S. intervention, even if dismissed, just underscores how sensitive countries are about perceived foreign meddling in their domestic politics.
Okay, let's hop over the channel to the UK now. Lots of debate there around migration and welfare reform.
Always a hot topic in the UK. What's the latest?
Well, a Conservative government minister, Kemi Badenoch, is pushing for a ban on some foreigners receiving sickness benefits. The proposal involves stricter criteria, trying to limit those benefits only to people with the most severe health conditions.
Yeah.
It's part of a wider push for welfare reform.
Tightening eligibility for benefits, particularly for non-citizens. That's a pretty standard theme in right-leaning policy discussions, isn't it? Aiming to reduce government spending, curb perceived welfare dependency.
Right. But it immediately sparks debate from the other side, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. From a left-leaning perspective, it raises huge questions about social fairness, humanitarian responsibilities, the social safety net, especially for people who might be vulnerable or have contributed through taxes. It's always a deeply divisive issue.
And sticking with migration, but moving south to Greece, a country in Southeast Europe, they've taken a pretty drastic step.
Greece. They're on the front lines of migration into Europe. What have they done?
They've announced a 3-month suspension of processing asylum applications for migrants arriving by sea from North Africa. This applies particularly to arrivals on the islands of Crete and Gavdos, where they say the number of arrivals has shot up by 380% since the beginning of 2025.
Suspending asylum processing entirely for 3 months. Wow.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, issued a strong warning. He said anyone entering illegally would face arrest and detention, basically declaring that sea route closed.
That is a hardline stance. It really underscores the immense pressure countries like Greece on the EU's external border are under, with these increased migration flows, suspending asylum processing, declaring a route closed. It highlights that huge tension between their international obligations to asylum seekers and their domestic political pressure to control borders. It's a pragmatic, tough-on-security approach, but one that definitely raises major red flags for human rights organizations.
Yeah, let's go to India, the world's biggest democracy. There's a major challenge brewing around voter eligibility.
Voter eligibility in India, what's the issue?
The government is requiring a staggering 80 million people to prove they're eligible to vote. This is due to concerns or rules around new ID requirements potentially disenfranchising millions ahead of a key upcoming election.
80 million people needing to reprove their right to vote. That's massive. What are the concerns?
Critics are arguing that these new rules and the verification process will disproportionately hit marginalized communities, poorer people, people in remote areas, minorities who might struggle to produce the required documents or navigate the bureaucracy. The fear is it could effectively suppress their votes and silence their voices.
Yeah, that raises huge questions about democratic access and potential voter suppression on a massive scale.
Yeah.
Requiring so many people to re-verify could definitely create significant hurdles, especially for vulnerable groups. It puts India's commitment to universal suffrage under scrutiny and draws criticism from civil liberties groups watching election fairness globally.
Over in Kenya, in East Africa, the situation with anti-government protests is getting really intense and, frankly, quite scary.
Yeah, I've seen some headlines. What's the latest development?
President William Ruto has actually equated the protests with acts of terrorism, and he's instructed security forces to shoot protesters who attack businesses. In the legs, were his words.
Shoot protesters, even in the legs. That's an order to use lethal or potentially lethal force against civilians. That's a terrifying escalation.
It is. Over 30 people have reportedly died already, hundreds more injured or arrested. Human rights groups, including Kenya's own National Commission on Human Rights, have strongly condemned the violence and the president's rhetoric.
That's deeply alarming. The president framing protests as terrorism and ordering security forces to shoot. It signals a severe clampdown, a disregard for basic rights. It points to serious political instability and a potential human rights crisis unfolding, drawing international condemnation.
On a completely different note, a sort of awkward diplomatic moment at the White House recently.
Oh.
President Trump was hosting a diplomatic lunch with 5 African leaders, and during the lunch, he complimented the president of Liberia, Joseph Boakai, on his good English.
Uh-oh. Complimenting an African leader on their English can sometimes come across as condescending. How did President Boakai respond?
Apparently, he just calmly explained that he was educated in Liberia, which is a country in West Africa, and that English is actually the official language there.
Ah, a polite history lesson.
Pretty much. It sparked a bit of discussion afterwards about Liberia's really unique history, founded by freed American slaves, and its resulting linguistic ties to the U.S. A reminder of how a simple comment can sometimes reveal deeper historical contexts that maybe aren't widely known.
Yeah, it shows how history shapes national identity, including language, in ways that aren't always obvious. A good reminder to be aware of those unique contexts.
Let's jump over to China now. There's been observation of some visible dissent online recently, but the analysis suggests we shouldn't read too much into it in terms of the leadership changing.
Right, so dissent is visible, but it doesn't mean Xi Jinping is on his way out.
Exactly. The thinking is that the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, actually strategically allows certain types of dissent online. Sometimes they even promote specific forms of it.
Allows it? Why would they do that?
Well, it's seen as part of their sophisticated toolkit for authoritarian governance. It can act as a kind of pressure release valve, letting people vent frustrations in a controlled way. And importantly, it allows the state to monitor public sentiment, see what issues are bubbling up, without actually losing control.
Ah, so it's managed dissent, a way to gauge the public mood and maybe identify potential troublemakers, rather than a sign of weakening control. That's a key insight into how digital authoritarianism can work. It's not always just about total censorship. Sometimes it's about channeling and monitoring dissatisfaction. 3. Global commerce and economic currents.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to the world of global commerce, money, markets. Some really big moves happening, and those trade war drums are beating pretty loudly again. Major mergers and market moves. First up, a pretty interesting merger in the food world. A sweet and savory deal, you could say. The Italian confectionery giant Ferrero, Nutella, Ferrero Rocher.
I know them well. Who are they buying?
They're acquiring the U.S. breakfast cereal giant, W.K. Kellogg, the company that makes Frosted Flakes, Fruit Loops, etc., for about $3.1 billion.
Ferrero buying Kellogg's cereal business.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a surprise. A big move into breakfast.
Yeah, it seems like a strategic expansion for Ferrero. And the market liked it. Kellogg shares apparently jumped over 50% in after-hours trading when the news broke. That's despite Kellogg having some financial struggles recently.
That big jump shows investors see potential synergies, or maybe just value Ferrero's management getting involved. It's definitely a significant diversification for Ferrero, moving beyond just sweets. Shows they see opportunity even in a mature market like breakfast cereal, especially if they think they can turn Kellogg's fortunes around. A classic play for new revenue streams.
We already talked about NVIDIA hitting that mind-blowing $4 trillion market cap. Just incredible.
Still hard to fathom.
But let's look at the wider market reaction around that. Because it wasn't all sunshine. Dow Jones futures actually dipped, partly influenced by chipmaker performance, including NVIDIA's perhaps. And overall, U.S. stock futures were kind of slipping too. It seems like traders are maybe looking for the next big catalyst, feeling a bit uncertain despite these huge individual company stories.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The market sensitivity, even when a giant like NVIDIA hits a record, it suggests maybe a broader underlying caution. Investors might be thinking, okay, AI is huge, but what else is driving the economy right now? There's maybe some uncertainty about where the next wave of growth comes from, leading to some volatility.
But not all gloom, right? You mentioned airlines earlier.
Right. Delta Airlines, for instance, they actually revised their profit outlook for 2025 downwards, which you might think is bad news.
Usually is.
But their CEO also said that demand for flying with them has stabilized. And that seemed to reassure investors enough that it actually caused stocks for United and American Airlines to rise too. So kind of a cautious optimism settling over the airline sector, perhaps.
And there's a prediction about investment shifts happening in Canada.
Oh, yeah. What's the forecast there?
CIBC, one of the big Canadian banks, is predicting what they call a powerful exodus of money out of those super safe guaranteed investment certificates, GICs.
Okay, where's the money predicted to go instead?
Into dividend-paying stocks on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the TSX. The thinking is that with interest rates expected to stay relatively low, those dividend stocks will look much more attractive for income investors by 2025. A definite shift in investment strategies seeking higher yields. B, trade wars and tariffs. All right, let's wade into the trade war arena now, because things are definitely heating up again, and it's reshaping how countries and companies operate globally. Former U.S. President Donald Trump made a big announcement regarding Brazil.
What's the tariff situation there?
He announced a hefty 50% tariff on goods imported from Brazil, the major South American economy. And here's the twist. He explicitly linked this tariff to his support for Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro.
Wait, linked a trade tariff to supporting a specific foreign politician?
Yes. He urged Brazilian authorities to dismiss charges against Bolsonaro related to an alleged coup attempt and basically tied the tariff relief to that outcome. It's really raised tensions and made trade relations way more complex, using tariffs as direct political leverage.
Wow, that is highly unconventional. Tying trade policies so explicitly to the internal legal affairs of another sovereign nation and to supporting a specific political figure that really pushes trade disputes into overtly political territory, far beyond just economic arguments. It definitely raises ethical questions about using trade as a political weapon like that, a clear example of that more nationalist, transactional foreign policy approach.
And this move, along with other tariff talk, has reignited that whole de-dollarization discussion.
Yes, the idea of countries moving away from using the U.S. dollar for global trade. How does this tariff fit in?
Well, a politician in Kenya, Booker Omoy, publicly criticized Trump's proposed 10% blanket tariff on all imports from the BRICS nations. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus the newer members like Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, the UAE, and Indonesia.
Right, the expanding BRICS group. What was the criticism?
Omoy warned that these kinds of broad tariffs would actually accelerate the global shift away from relying on the U.S. dollar. He argued it just gives BRICS nations more reason to push harder on trading in their own currencies, building their own alternative financial systems, precisely to avoid this kind of U.S. economic pressure.
That's a fascinating counterargument, that the tariffs, intended perhaps to assert U.S. strength, could inadvertently speed up the creation of a rival system. And how are BRICS nations reacting?
Well, Indonesia, one of the newer members since early 2025, basically said they're sticking with the bloc, despite Trump threatening extra duties that could hit 42% for some countries. And the BRICS members put out a collective statement condemning what they called arbitrary tariffs. Russia even pointed out that U.S. sanctions had already forced them to reduce dollar usage, essentially arguing that Washington's own actions are driving countries to seek alternatives.
So it seems to be galvanizing the BRICS group, strengthening their resolve to build that alternative financial infrastructure. It suggests economic pressure can sometimes backfire, speeding up the very geopolitical shifts it might be trying to prevent, pushing towards a more multipolar financial world.
Trump didn't stop with Brazil or the BRICS proposal. He also announced a 50% tariff on copper imports starting August 1st.
Copper. Why copper?
The stated goal is to revitalize the U.S. domestic copper industry and bolster national security. Copper is crucial for things like semiconductors, wiring, and defense applications.
Right, a critical mineral. So this tariff hits major exporters like
Chile, Canada, Mexico primarily, they're the big suppliers to the U.S.
a 50% tariff on copper is huge. That's a massive protectionist move aiming to force production back to the U.S. But the critics must be raising concerns about costs, right?
Oh, yeah. Critics worry it will significantly drive up costs for American manufacturers who rely on imported copper, at least in the short term. And they question whether it will actually lead to a big boost in U.S. domestic production quickly, since opening mines and refineries takes a very long time and huge investment. It highlights that classic trade-off: short-term economic pain for potential long-term strategic gain, and whether the strategy is actually feasible. So how are companies in other countries actually reacting on the ground to these tariffs, or the threat of them?
Well, we're seeing direct impacts. Japanese car makers, for example, based in Japan and East Asia, have reportedly slashed their export prices to the U.S. dramatically by 19.4%. That's the biggest price cut since 2016.
Slashing prices by almost 20%.
Why? To try and offset the negative impact of U.S. tariffs and stay competitive in the American market. But obviously, that eats heavily into their profits. It raises real concerns about their financial health if this continues.
And it's not just price cuts.
No. Separately, the German carmaker Volkswagen from Germany and Central Europe has actually temporarily stopped delivering its electric van, the ID Buzz model, to the U.S. market. They explicitly cited U.S. tariffs as a key reason.
Wow, halting deliveries entirely. That really shows the immediate concrete effects these trade policies have on global supply chains and corporate decisions. Companies are forced into these tough choices, sacrifice profits, or pull back from markets, and it impacts consumers too, through price or availability, real-world consequences. Lastly, on the trade front, India, the South Asian nation, is making strategic moves regarding rare earth magnets.
Rare earths. Always a critical area, dominated by China. What's India planning?
They're planning to significantly ramp up their own domestic production of these powerful magnets, which are essential for electric motors, wind turbines, lots of high-tech stuff.
Aiming to reduce reliance on China, presumably.
Exactly. This is a direct response to China imposing new export controls on rare earth materials recently. Those controls disrupted global supply chains, hitting car manufacturers in India particularly hard. Japan has also voiced strong concerns about China's export curbs.
This really highlights that global vulnerability, doesn't it? So many critical technologies depend on rare earths, and China controls most of the supply. India's move and Japan's concern, it signals this broader global push to diversify supply chains for critical minerals, build up domestic capacity, and just reduce that strategic dependency on a single source. It's all about enhancing national and economic security in the face of these geopolitical supply chain risks. See, business adaptations and economic indicators.
Okay, let's look briefly at how some businesses are adapting to these broader economic pressures and changing consumer habits. Over in the UK, Royal Mail, the postal service.
Right, what are they doing? Facing challenges like postal services everywhere, I imagine.
Quite are. They've just been given the green light to stop delivering second-class mail on Saturdays.
No more Saturday post for second class. Why?
Yeah. Purely a cost-saving measure. They expect it to save them a significant amount of money, potentially up to $425 million a year, and help them become more efficient as the volume of traditional mail continues to decline in the digital age.
It's a big adaptation, reflecting those shifting realities. Less mail means they have to restructure, a sign of the times for traditional industries needing to change or face financial trouble.
And changing consumer habits are also hitting businesses in Japan. Kirin Holdings, the big beverage company, they announced they're going to stop selling Beaujolais Nouveau wine in Japan.
Really? Beaujolais Nouveau is or was a huge phenomenon there for years. Why stop now?
Two main reasons cited: rising freight costs making it less profitable to import, and simply changing tastes among Japanese consumers. Apparently, the craze has faded.
Wow. Freight costs and changing tastes ending a decades-long tradition shows how global economics and local preferences interact.
And another Japanese retail giant, Fast Retailing Co., they own Uniqlo.
Right. How are they doing?
They reported third-quarter earnings that missed analyst estimates. And the main reason given was weaker sales in China, which significantly impacted their overall performance.
The China slowdown factor, hitting a major global apparel brand. That highlights just how important the Chinese consumer market is for so many international companies and how sensitive their profits are to shifts in demand there. Underscores that interconnectedness of global consumer economies. 4. Climate environment, and public safety.
All right, let's shift our focus now to stories about our planet, the environment, and unfortunately, the times when things go wrong, natural disasters, and public safety issues. These stories are often stark reminders of nature's power, our vulnerabilities, and how well or poorly our infrastructure holds up. Natural disasters and environmental concerns. First, some really devastating news out of central Texas in the United States. The death toll from the recent severe floods there has now tragically climbed past 100 people.
Over 100 confirmed deaths. That's horrific. And are there still people missing?
Yes, latest reports say at least 160 people are still unaccounted for. Search and recovery efforts are ongoing day and night. There's been a strong community response, people pulling together to support each other and help the search teams, but it's just a terrible situation.
The scale of that is just immense. 100 dead, 160 missing. It highlights the sheer destructive power of these extreme weather events, which seem to be getting more frequent and intense. And the high number of missing just prolongs the agony for those families waiting for news. It really underscores the need for better preparedness, warning systems, and robust emergency response when these things hit.
And it's not just Texas. There's a story connecting climate change directly to a disaster in Nepal, the country in South Asia. A deadly flood there has left at least 19 people missing.
A flood in Nepal linked to climate change. How?
This flood was apparently triggered by the sudden drainage of a glacial lake high up in Tibet across the border. An international climate body has specifically attributed this event, the instability of the glacial lake leading to the outburst flood, to the effects of climate change melting the glaciers.
A GLOF event, glacial lake outburst flood. Those are incredibly dangerous. And this one crossed borders.
Exactly. It really highlights how climate impacts don't respect national boundaries. Melting glaciers in Tibet causing a deadly flood downstream in Nepal. It shows the shared vulnerability of communities in these mountain regions and the urgent need for cross-border cooperation on climate adaptation and early warning systems for these kinds of hazards. Meanwhile, extreme weather is hitting major cities too. Over in Tokyo, the capital of Japan.
What happened there? Typhoon season.
Not a typhoon, but a massive torrential downpour right during the evening rush hour. It was so intense that the meteorological agency issued emergency warnings for heavy rain, flooding, and lightning. Some parts of the city, like Sujinami Ward, got 120 millimeters of rain that's nearly 5 inches in just a short period. Huge disaster risk.
Wow, that much rain in a dense city like Tokyo during rush hour must cause absolute chaos. Infrastructure gets overwhelmed, transport grinds to a halt.
Totally. And at the other end of the spectrum, the United Kingdom is bracing for the opposite extreme, a heat wave.
Heat wave in the UK. How hot is it expected to get?
Temperatures are forecast to peak around 34 degrees Celsius. That's about 93 Fahrenheit this Friday, possibly into Saturday, especially in southern and central England. Today, they're expecting highs of 30 to 32 Celsius in those areas.
Okay, 34°C is seriously hot for the UK, where air conditioning isn't as widespread. That poses real health risks, doesn't it? Especially for the elderly or people with existing health conditions.
Definitely. So you have extreme rainfall paralyzing one major city and extreme heat posing health risks in another region. Both events, increasingly linked by scientists to climate change, just demonstrate how these localized weather extremes are becoming a major challenge for cities and countries worldwide, demanding better planning and more resilient infrastructure. B, public safety and infrastructure issues. Now let's turn to some deeply concerning public safety and infrastructure failures. A truly horrific incident occurred in Gujarat, in western India.
What happened in Gujarat?
A bridge, the 40-year-old Gambhira Bridge over the Mahagar River, just collapsed, tragically.
Oh no, a bridge collapse. Were people hurt?
Yes, very badly. 15 people were killed. 5 vehicles that were on the bridge at the time fell into the river below. Emergency crews managed to rescue 9 people.
15 killed. That's awful. Was there any warning? Was the bridge known to be unsafe?
That's the really upsetting part. Local residents are expressing immense frustration, saying the government had neglected the bridge for years. Apparently, it had already been flagged as being in hazardous condition. It was even known locally as a suicide hotspot, suggesting it was maybe structurally unsound or poorly maintained for a long time.
So known risks were ignored? That makes it even more tragic.
Exactly. And this comes after another terrible bridge collapse disaster in the same region back in 2022 that killed 141 people. It really highlights these ongoing systemic concerns about infrastructure maintenance, oversight, and public safety in that area. It's a devastating reminder that neglecting infrastructure isn't just an economic issue. It has fatal consequences. In the U.S., another concerning incident related to emergency response, this one in Kerr County, Texas, during the recent flooding we mentioned.
What happened with the response there?
Dispatch audio recordings revealed that county officials apparently waited 90 minutes, an hour and a half, before sending out an emergency alert to the public, even though they had received requests for immediate notification about the flood danger much earlier.
A 90-minute delay in sending a flood alert.
Yeah.
When every minute counts in those situations,
Yeah.
that seems like a serious failure.
It does. It raises major questions about the effectiveness, the protocols, and the timeliness of their emergency warning system. Why the delay? Who made the decision? It definitely warrants a review of how they handle emergency communications. Over in Japan, they're tightening rules for foreign drivers.
Oh, what's changing?
Japan's National Police Agency has announced stricter requirements for foreigners wanting to convert their home country driver's license to a Japanese one. Now, applicants have to provide a certificate of residence as part of the process.
A certificate of residence? Why the change now?
They say it's a direct response to a recent series of high-profile, serious car accidents involving foreign drivers. So the stated aim is purely about enhancing road safety, making sure foreign drivers are properly registered and perhaps more accountable.
Okay, so a reaction to specific incidents aimed at safety. But does it create extra hurdles for foreigners living and working there?
That's the potential downside, right? Balancing public safety goals with ensuring the process isn't overly burdensome or discriminatory for foreign residents trying to integrate into Japanese society. It's a common tension. View society, culture, and sports. Lighter touches. All right, to start wrapping things up, let's broaden our view a bit, touch on some wider societal issues, cultural moments, and yes, even some sports, just to get a glimpse of the human experience beyond the heavy headlines. Social commentary and health updates. First, a really stark piece of social commentary from the development organization Oxfam looking at wealth in Africa.
Oxfam often highlights inequality. What did this report find?
It's pretty staggering. The report reveals that just 4 extremely wealthy individuals in Africa, they name Nigerian billionaire Aliko Dangote, 2 South Africans, Johann Rupert and Nicky Oppenheimer, and an Egyptian businessman, Nassef Sawiris, collectively possess more wealth than the entire bottom half of the continent's population combined.
4 men own more than 500 million people.
That's the claim. It just vividly underscores the extreme concentration of wealth on the continent, even amidst overall economic growth in some areas. It highlights this massive challenge of inequality, raising big questions about economic justice, resource distribution, and policies needed to share prosperity more widely. A powerful statistic. On a much more positive note, a significant health breakthrough. The pharmaceutical company Novartis has received approval for a new malaria medicine.
Malaria is still a huge killer, especially of children. What's special about this new medicine?
It's the first malaria treatment specifically designed and approved for newborn babies and very young infants.
Ah, tailored for the youngest, most vulnerable group. That's fantastic news.
It really is. Malaria hits young children the hardest, and having a medicine formulated just for them could dramatically improve their chances of survival, reduce mortality rates. It fills a critical gap in pediatric healthcare and offers real hope for millions in malaria-prone regions.
That's genuinely great news. A real advancement.
But unfortunately, there's also some worrying news on the global health funding front, specifically regarding HIV/AIDS. The United Nations has issued a pretty grave warning.
A warning about AIDS funding. What's the concern?
They're warning that potential cuts to U.S. foreign aid, particularly to the program known as PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, could have devastating consequences.
PEPFAR has been hugely important for decades, hasn't it? What kind of consequences are they projecting?
The UN projections are dire. They estimate that significant cuts could lead to millions more HIV/AIDS deaths by the year 2029. Specifically, they're forecasting possibly 6 million additional HIV infections and 4 million more AIDS-related deaths if the funding is drastically reduced.
6 million more infections, 4 million more deaths. That's catastrophic. It would reverse so much progress.
Exactly. It just underscores how absolutely crucial that sustained international aid, programs like PEPFAR, have been in fighting the global epidemic. Political decisions made in Washington about aid budgets have these incredibly direct life or death consequences for millions of people around the world. A stark reminder of global health interdependence. Switching gears to a bit of media controversy in the UK. a TV personality, Greg Wallace. You might know him from MasterChef.
Yeah, no, Greg Wallace. What did he get involved in?
He faced a pretty big backlash after making some comments on a daytime TV show, BBC's Steph's Packed Lunch. He seemed to suggest that having a good education could somehow prevent children from being autistic.
Oh, dear. Suggesting education can prevent autism? That's biologically incorrect and quite offensive.
Right, it caused a huge uproar. He did apologize later, but the incident sparked these wider debates about how autism is portrayed in the media, the level of public understanding or misunderstanding, and the responsibility public figures have when talking about complex conditions like neurodiversity. It really highlighted the need for more sensitivity and accurate information. And circling back briefly to the situation in Kenya, beyond the political violence, there's a focus on the human cost for the young protesters involved.
Yeah, the Gen Z generation has been prominent in these protests, haven't they? What's the impact on them?
Reports indicate that these young protesters are facing significant emotional trauma and anxiety. The constant clashes with police, the fear, the uncertainty, it's becoming their daily reality, leading to serious psychological stress.
That's heartbreaking. It's a heavy burden for young people to carry. It's a reminder that the costs of political unrest aren't just physical injuries or arrests. There's this deep emotional and psychological toll, especially on the generation on the front lines, that can last a long time. B Sports highlights.
Okay, let's lighten the mood finally with a quick spin through the world of sports, some big contracts, tournament drama, and more. First up, the NBA.
Basketball. What's the big news?
The Phoenix Suns and their star player, Devin Booker, have reportedly agreed on a massive contract extension. A historic one, actually. 2 years for $145 million. Max contract.
Wow, $145 million for 2 years. That's huge money, even for the NBA. Solidifies him as their franchise cornerstone.
Definitely. Shows the team's commitment to building around him and just reflects how high player salaries keep climbing in pro sports. Big stakes. Over to tennis, and Wimbledon saw some major drama in the semifinals.
Wimbledon semis. Always exciting what happened.
Well, Novak Djokovic, chasing yet more history, set up this highly anticipated clash with the young Italian star Jannik Sinner. But there's a question mark over Djokovic. He had a nasty fall in his previous match, and the verdict on his injury was delayed. Add some suspense.
Ooh, Djokovic potentially injured facing Sinner. That could change everything. And on the women's side,
big news there, too. The American player, Amanda Anisimova, pulled off a stunning upset, beating Aryna Sabalenka to reach her first ever Wimbledon final. And the world number one, Igor Swiatek, also booked her spot in the semis for the first time at Wimbledon.
wow, Anisimova in the final. Upsets and breakthroughs, that's what makes Grand Slams exciting, right? The established champions being challenged, new faces emerging under pressure.
Definitely. Now, Formula One racing has seen a major shakeup at one of the top teams.
F1. Which team? What happened?
Red Bull Racing. Christian Horner, their team principal, who's overseen incredible success but also faced controversy, his long reign has come to what reports are calling a brutal end.
Horner out at Red Bull. After all those championships. Why?
Seems like a combination of factors. Reports mention the team's car not being as competitive this season, their star driver Max Verstappen being unhappy and maybe losing some key technical staff behind the scenes. It's immediately sparked tons of speculation about Verstappen's own future with the team now.
Yeah, losing a long-standing leader like Horner, especially amid performance issues and driver discontent, that's a huge destabilizing event for a top F1 team. High drama in that high-pressure world.
And a really quick round of global football or soccer news.
Hit me.
In the Club World Cup, Paris Saint-Germain, PSG, handed Real Madrid a humiliating defeat to reach the final, where they'll play Chelsea. In the English Premier League transfer rumor mill, Tottenham Hotspur are reportedly trying to sign Nottingham Forest's midfielder Gibbs White for a hefty $60 million chammer fee. And over in the U.S., Lionel Messi scored twice for Inter Miami, setting a new Major League Soccer record in the process.
Okay, so drama in club competitions, big money transfers, and Messi still breaking records. Football never sleeps, does it? Shows the global reach and constant churn of the sport.
Never. Lastly, a quick touch on rugby and boxing. In rugby, Owen Farrell is set to be on the bench for the British and Irish Lions' final warm-up game before their crucial test series, seen as a strategic move. And Japan's rugby coach, Jamie Joseph, is challenging his team, the Brave Blossoms, to create history by trying to beat top-tier nations consecutively, starting with their upcoming match against Wales.
Japan, rugby aiming high. Good for them, shows the sport's growth. And boxing.
The Japanese boxing superstar Naya Inoue, known as Mumster, has his next big fight lined up. He's set to face Murojan Akhmadaliev in Nagoya, Japan.
Inoue fighting Akhmadaliev. That should be explosive. So strategic team selections in rugby, rising ambitions for nations like Japan, and blockbuster individual showdowns in boxing, sports offering plenty of narratives.
And breathe. We have navigated quite a landscape today, haven't we? From those incredible scientific leaps, understanding our deep past, our planet, all the way to the complex chess game of geopolitics, the tariffs, the conflicts, and touching on those very human stories, the disasters, the debates. It's been a lot.
It really has. And as we've seen, whether you're looking at the microscopic level, like human cells evolving faster in a lab, or huge macroscopic shifts in global alliances and trade patterns, our world is just in constant, rapid motion. This deep dive really highlighted, I think, how interconnected everything is. A scientific discovery can have economic ripples. A political decision can impact global health outcomes.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. We live in this era now where artificial intelligence can create incredibly realistic images, videos. It can even, as we saw with Grok, seem to express controversial views that spark real-world reactions. In this environment, how do you make sure your understanding of all these complex global events stays grounded in actual facts, in empathy? How do we avoid getting lost in all the digital noise, the spin, the AI-generated stuff?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? What responsibility do we all have, people trying to stay informed, to actively seek out these deeper dives, to connect the dots for ourselves, and to really critically examine the information we consume every day?
Something to think about. We invite you to keep asking those questions.